Flamborough-Glanbrook is part of the city of Greater Hamilton. Its nickname is the city of many communities, and it's aptly named. Much of the riding is rural, with expansive cornfields and picturesque outbuildings. These farms have been here for generations. But fast encroaching is another world. The world of brick houses, sidewalks, and two-car garages. Row after row of subdivisions, all built on fertile farmland. The candidates in this campaign have to appeal to the suburban voter and the farm community.
So I've got a great connection to the rural communities. I've worked in agriculture and agri-food as a career, so I understand and have a connection to the rural areas. Live here in the rural part of the riding, but I went to high school in not far from here in the suburban part of the riding, and there's been historical communities here going back to 1793 actually, but I think that's the job of the representative.
There are some needs here that are different than other parts of the city. So for example, there's a large commuting type population. One part of the riding in the west part is really a GTA centric type of riding, whereas where we are right now in the east part of the riding is new areas that are really Hamilton, not completely, but Hamilton generational, moving from traditionally where they were below the city up to here. Although there is some people moving from out of town. But we also have one of the largest farming communities in the Golden Horseshoe, if not the largest. Hamilton's farming community, Flamborough-Glanbrook, does about $1.3 billion a year, every year. And most people here don't know that. It employs thousands of people. It employs more people than Stelco does. So it's very important to our economy, and let's be quite frank, it's important to us because farmers feed people. We're not going to survive if we don't save our farmland.
I want to work with rural people. I think that farmers in this country, again, there's been some free trade deals that have been signed off by the Liberal government and the Tory government before them. Free trade deals don't typically do us a lot of good. From what I've seen, the results are not usually favorable. They usually cost Canadians jobs and sometimes industry. So, the farmers in this part of the country, in this part of Hamilton, Greater Hamilton, I think they have a very strong voice, and I want to hear what their concerns are.
The Green Party candidate lives in one of the new enclaves in the old village of Binbrook. How do you justify living in a subdivision like this that used to be farmland?
Well, that's it, and that's the hard part. I mean, Canadians, the big cities are getting overcrowded. People want out, and that's right. The big cities are becoming overpopulated. The smaller cities are being, maximized to their potential. I mean, this area here, there is actually restrictions on how big it can get. City of Hamilton and different things because of being on the escarpment. They can only let it get so big. And we've been out here for about 8 years, and we've more than doubled our population. The lady behind us, and you can see it from here, that farm, she's refusing to sell. Oh, no, the lady, it's her family. It's a lady, an older lady in her family. She's refusing to sell. She doesn't want it developed. You can see it from the end of the street here. It's a large farm. Like it goes all the way to Fletcher.
But yet you live in a
I know. That's why I moved out here to get out of the big city. It's one of those. It's how much further can we go? And the Canadian population is not increasing that much. You look at the census. We're not getting bigger dramatically as a population. So it's like, okay, do we continue to build vertically, which is what we're doing in the big suburbs because there's nowhere else to build, and then you move out to these urban sprawls like us, and it's like, okay, how much further do we want to go? And yeah, it's selfish, it's hypocritical, absolutely.
Hamilton Mayor Fred Eisenberger wants to stop the urban sprawl. He says the city has to build up, not out.
I'm personally not in favor of expanding the urban boundary. I think it's now a good time for us to assess the impacts of LRT. Once we get it finally approved and shovels in the ground and actually operating, we're going to see a massive amount of investment happening along that corridor, and that is going to be a large intensification opportunity that I think is going to be necessary.
Drew Spalestra has been a farmer his whole life.
Hey, Joel.
How concerned are you about all the development that's cropping up around here?
Yeah, development, particularly in this area, is a huge issue. Urban boundary expansions are one of our main concerns around here right now in the greater Golden Horseshoe, all around Toronto, Hamilton areas. There's obviously a need for housing, no question. I mean, all the main parties are going forward with trying to get more housing built, trying to get more access to housing, and that's very important. But so is producing food. People need to eat 3 times a day, and we need land to continue to be able to produce that food. So we want to ensure that prime agriculture land stays in agriculture. We can't continue at the rates of 150 acres a day that we've been losing to development going forward. So our main message is keep that prime agriculture land in agriculture. Find other places to build houses, build up, not out. Build closer to transit centers where you can actually move people and keep that agriculture land and food production.
One of the ways to densify is to provide more transit in the city. But the proposed light rapid transit line has been very divisive here.
I mean, LRT, in my mind, is a necessary part of the next generation of transportation transit in Hamilton, not unlike Toronto with the subway and the trolleys and all the opportunities they have for moving people. Congestion is and will be happening in Hamilton as well. It's not unique to Toronto or Mississauga. And so we need to be ahead of that. But the other half of the big reason is that the ability for us to attract more housing inner city and stop the kind of urban sprawl that is very costly for municipalities to have to deal with. A lot of that sprawl is actually happening in rural ridings like Flamborough and Ancaster and in Glanbrook. Large housing developments happening there, lots of more people moving in those areas, and a lot of them are demanding more transportation as well. But our inner city transportation is going to be an attractor to attract more housing developments in the inner city that will inspire higher density, more tax revenue that will help offset the pressure on taxes right throughout the city.
McMaster University professor Peter Graefe says the LRT conversation has dominated politics in the area for years.
So, I mean, for about 15 years, I've been discussing this project to run an LRT, a light rail transit line through downtown. And it has the support mostly of people who live in and near the line. People in further flung areas are worried that it's going to be a long-term, white elephant, that they'll be paying taxes in the long term to support a line that they aren't using and which may lose money. And so I think you have that kind of impact between the people downtown who see it as a kind of key for Hamilton's future economic growth and prosperity, and people in the more outlying areas who are much more skeptical of its potential.
Yeah, well, I'm Vito Sgro.
Oh, hi.
Very nice to meet you. Can I give you this card?
Sure.
Thank you so much. As you know, 4 weeks today, we have an election.
Yeah.
And we really want your support. So
Vito Sgro, the Liberal candidate, ran for mayor in 2018. He was staunchly opposed to the LRT, but now...
Well, it's quite well known what my opinion was. I'm not running for mayor. I'm not running for council. Whatever council decides, I will support 100%. To be successful, there's a plan called the Rapid Ready Report. There's a system called the Blast Network, which LRT is part of. For LRT to be successful, if that's the way we go, the rest of the transit system in Hamilton has to be there to support it. It has to go from Waterdown all the way through downtown, all the way to here. And that's what I'm going to push for.
Many of the rural residents oppose the LRT, but Drew Spilestra says it could be a positive for the area.
Personally, I'm probably never going to use the LRT, but I think it's great for the downtown, and it provides that opportunity to move people around. But you have to plan ahead and build the housing around that LRT so that it can actually get used efficiently. It doesn't do anybody in Elfrida any good for that LRT to be downtown.
Or in Binbrook.
Exactly. Yeah.
Greater Hamilton is growing at a rapid pace. There is a steady influx of people from Toronto who come here looking for more affordable housing.
Well, Hamilton is 25% diverse, which is a blessing. I think we embrace that. I think Hamilton for All really speaks to everyone that comes here is part of Hamilton. But we're also seeing a lot of transplanted Torontonians selling the big property in Toronto and getting twice the house at half the price here in Hamilton. Although that's slowly and surely that's changing. But we see a lot of that migration happening as well, and that certainly affects pricing. Torontonians are more used to higher prices and don't have any problem paying an extra $50,000 or $100,000 more. And so that's had an impact for sure.
This is probably the fastest area of growth in the greater city of Hamilton. Waterdown on the one end, Elfrida, Bimbrook on the other side of the riding, very fast growing. You know, I remember as a kid, you know, Elfrida was a stop sign. Now there's 20,000 people there. And these are often people who are first-time home buyers moving in from Toronto, Mississauga, Peel region, for the most part. One person from Vancouver, they told me, you know, coming here because you know, housing is more affordable here than, say, in, you know, Toronto proper and you know, the inner GTA.
Because of the housing issues in the GTA, this was cheaper. And I'll give you an example. From 2015 to 2019, the number of votes went up 7,000 votes. Okay, and that's just an influx of people. There are subdivisions and properties that are not on our list, and our lists are fairly up to date. They weren't there in 2019, and we're talking in hundreds, if not thousands, of new houses. So it's a completely different type of riding. It used to be known as strictly rural, with a few places. I don't know if you can say that now. Geographically, it's rural. There's no doubt about it, but it's a GTA part riding in the west, and a Hamilton-type suburban here in the east part of the riding.
These newcomers to the area could change the voting patterns in this election.
Well, we're seeing what we're seeing across the GTA, right, which is a continued building out of Toronto, development of new suburbs, and so you move from relatively rural areas to ones with, you know, new families moving into subdivisions and looking for maybe different things in terms of things like childcare, you know, services for their kids. Their concerns are probably a bit different than the people who were living there previously.
I am going to all the neighborhoods I can, of newer ones especially, because the GTA tends to vote a certain way, and it's beneficial to our campaign.
In what way?
They're usually voting Liberal when things are good like this, and things are, you know, we're getting through the pandemic. Our economy is going to be one of the best in the G7 in the next half of the year. It's that type of voter, and I think we can get them.
Well, I think it's, in this riding, I think it's going to be a positive impact for the NDP. It's a rural, has always been kind of a rural riding. So because of the you know, the growth in the last decade, you know, we've got a lot of real cross demographic now. There's a lot of people with different you know, different thoughts, and you know, they're more urban, I guess you would say, than rural. So you know, I think that will definitely have an impact on the way people are voting in the riding. It won't be a traditional you know, PC or Liberal riding. I think that the NDP has a good chance to make some gains.
Vito Sgro senses this shift in demographics. The Liberals lost by just 1,600 votes here in 2019. He's pulling out all the stops, talking to as many residents as he can, even hailing cars driving along the road.
Hello. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Nice to see you. Hi. You guys going to be voting, I hope?
Of course.
Good. Can I count on your support? The riding lost by 1,600 votes. That's 8 people per poll. Okay, that's over 2 houses. We need to get our volunteers out and get that extra 10, 12, 15 per poll. It's going to be close. I'm being completely realistic that it's going to be close. We've got a fantastic team. We've got so many volunteers. It's exciting that way. We've got a great campaign team that know what they're doing. We've got a great leader. We've got a great support from the Central Party. So I'm confident. I think we can do it.
Yeah, just out to introduce myself and you know, ask you if you have any questions about the NDP or what its platform stands for.
And the changing face of Flamborough-Glanbrook could also prove advantageous for the New Democrats.
You've been listening to what they've been saying, talking about. Yeah. What do you think about Mr. Singh? In this area, I think it's a lot of blue collar folk. So I think that you know, I think that they're National Farmer Care Plan is probably something that's very near and dear to everybody out here. Not everybody has a company drug plan to rely on, and you know, it's expensive if you have to go and pay for a prescription, especially if it's a long-term prescription, something that you're on for many years. It becomes very expensive. So pharmacare, I'm sure, is probably quite an important you know, issue for everybody in this area.
Do the NDP have a shot in this riding?
I don't think the NDP has much of a shot. Provincially, they finished a close second in the last provincial election, but I think this is shaping up to really be a race between the former mayoral candidate and the person who's succeeding David Sweet, his old constituency official, and I think that will really be the conflict in that race. And you know, one to really see. I mean, have the demographics changed enough to make that kind of impact? And then the candidates themselves, I think, will have their own impact. I mean, the previous Liberal candidate was much younger, dynamic, you know, young lawyer, probably spoke more to the newcomers in those, you know, new suburbs. Vito Sgro is a bit more of an older traditional politician. He may have less of an impact in that way.
The past Member of Parliament, David Sweet, was a political fixture in this area for years. The Conservatives dominated here until he offered to resign because of a questionable trip he took to the U.S. during the pandemic. Dan Muys, his would-be CPC successor, worked alongside Sweet for more than 15 years.
I've worked with David Sweet, and so happy to have his support. But,
very.
How difficult is it going to be to fill David Sweet's shoes?
You know, I've worked with David Sweet over the years, as well as with Donna Scully, who's the provincial member of Parliament. I've worked in Parliament Hill, I've worked in Queen's Park, but I actually have, you know, beyond politics, 20 years in the private sector, in agriculture, in the energy sector as well. You know, worked on about $10 billion of bids for energy infrastructure projects when I worked out in Calgary. So, you know, I want to bring that experience to the table. You know, David has been a friend, and you know, we have a relation that's based on mutual respect. But you know, I'm a different person too, and that's what I've been trying to do as I get to the doors. And you know, when we're knocking on doors, you know, first and foremost, like, who are you and what are you about? And so, you know, I give the spiel, and there's you know, there's a bit about me on the literature, because it's important to, you know, introduce yourself.
Flamborough-Glanbrook is one of 3 out of 5 Hamilton ridings without an incumbent. How is that going to affect the voting, do you think?
Well, I mean, there's a bit of an incumbency effect in terms of people who are known. And so, you know, in a riding such as that one, the fact that you are losing someone who has been present, who's had his face in the community for the past 15 years, will have an impact. I mean, similarly, when you get to Hamilton Mountain, again, the loss of the incumbent means that there's a new person there who has to gain the confidence of the voters, and so it opens the seat to, you know, potentially other parties. And again, we could say the same thing in Hamilton East Stony Creek, you know, which has been a bit of a closer riding between the Liberals and the NDP. Does the fact that you have a new Liberal candidate open the door to the NDP in that kind of situation? In that instance, maybe less so, because you have a sitting city councillor running, and so he already has a bit of a political base in that riding.
Green Party candidate Thomas Hatch feels the connection people have to the environment will give him an edge in this race.
There was a lot of votes down there last time.
People care. We are, as Canadians, an environmentally conscious society. Look around my neighborhood. You know, you've got the brown bags with the grass clippings in it. You've got the 1 or 2 bags of garbage. You've got 4 and 5 recycling bins. People are taking the time to do all the work, to put the things in the right bins, to put it in the right sequence so that it gets to the dumps properly. This year, what we're asking, they vote environmentally conscious. They're doing the work. Just vote that way.
Unfortunately, Hatch says infighting within the party has cast a bit of a pall over his campaign.
It's hurting. It's unfortunate that had to play out in the media. You know, anytime there's political rift in a major corporation or a political party, it'd be beneficial to everybody that if it stayed inside the inner circle. And I've had this conversation. I've had, you know, messages sent to my Facebook and my Instagram account, people in my riding who are on the teeter of, you know, maybe we don't vote Green this year. I said, this year above all, you know, we've got candidates all throughout the country. All the other parties have candidates throughout the country. This year, you need to put your trust in the person that's actually got the foot on the ground, the person that's actually going door to door, the person's out talking in their community. You know, don't worry about the inner politics if they're there between the parties or what's not going on within the inner workings of the party. believe in your candidates. It doesn't matter what party they're representing. This is the year above all that we have to believe in the people that are actually giving up their time because they believe in the future of Canada.
Fixed taxation.
The People's Party of Canada is also fielding a candidate in this riding. Although Bill Panchyshyn is doubly vaccinated, he says no one should be compelled to get a shot.
And there's a real mix of reactions, and it's been an eye-opener. I've spoken with, I know, spoken with people where they are adamant. I've had people say, you know what, I know what the effects are of COVID on people, and I will not support an open choice on COVID vaccines. And I can appreciate where that comes from, because if it's affected you personally, it's going to obviously influence your opinion. I've also spoken with people who, actually one group in particular, one person in particular, her husband had a negative reaction to COVID and had a lot of heart issues, and this was a healthy 50-something male. So I've listened to both sides of it. For the people who don't want the COVID vaccine, I mean, they're afraid too. They're afraid. Nobody wants to get sick. Nobody wants to get COVID. And people who don't want the COVID vaccine are in that boat. They don't want to get COVID. But at the same time, they're nervous about the vaccine for a variety of reasons, from it being new to potential side effects. I can really see both sides as someone who is fully vaccinated. And I can appreciate where people who are hesitant are coming from. And I just try to keep an open mind on it.
As life slowly gets back to normal in the riding, thoughts turn to the economic recovery. One of the big questions in this area is, how do you create jobs in Hamilton so people don't have to commute to go to work? The answer? The International Airport.
If you go to the airport, you'll see that Amazon and a lot of companies like that, there are massive structures going on there. These are working, living jobs going there. It could number in the thousands, and we'll do everything we can to support the city to get these types of industries there. So I'm very excited about that.
The mayor says other job opportunities are also coming to Hamilton.
You know, we don't want to be a bedroom community to Toronto. We love Toronto. We love Toronto's cultural capacity. We have a fair bit of it ourselves and a lot of history here. But we need employment opportunities, and those employment opportunities are growing significantly, predominantly in the click economy space around the airport, in health and life sciences. Lots of research happening right here in Hamilton that's turning into actually active products. And we have a number of former brownfield sites that are turning into film studios. Other locations around the former steelmaking capacity plants are also turning into new employment opportunities as a result of their downsizing. So, you know, we have a good base of lands that can attract manufacturing or industrial or commercial or cultural opportunities that can exist right here in Hamilton.
Even with migrant workers, farmers are having a tough time getting people to work.
We have huge issues with labor and agriculture, shortage of skilled labor. Just generally people that want to do the jobs. We rely on a lot of offshore labor, temporary foreign workers, seasonal ag workers, and obviously through the pandemic it's been quite a concern to try and get those folks here, keep them safe, keep them working, and keep food on the shelves. So labor in general is one of our big issues.
Young people we spoke with say jobs matter most to them.
A lot of people will go to school for business or more creative type, not necessarily economic related jobs, but jobs that they feel that they would love to do. But it's been a challenge for a lot of people because the market hasn't always been as receptive to, I studied multimedia. It's like, well, I have a business degree job for you, but you don't have that. So it's kind of been an interesting cycle, at least on my end. I can't speak for you, but
I think the requirements are what make it tricky to get a job. So I was very lucky. I was just working enough that I knew who to talk to, I knew where to work, and I could just like climb up the ladder working somewhere. But when I was applying for jobs, when I was looking for jobs, I have a multimedia background. So, I can do photography, I can do video, I can do graphic design, whatever you need. But when you're applying for entry-level positions, that paid minimum wage, you need to have 5+ years of experience. You need to have 3 diplomas, 12 degrees. The requirements to get in are so steep for a job that's, for maybe being an intern. And it's just stressful because like now you have this education that you spend so much time for, but it's not and money for, and it's not enough. But even when you get those jobs, what they're looking for isn't even what they hire you for.
These young men say affordability is also a problem.
Our generation's so used to having like 4 or 5 roommates to be able to afford one place, even just renting. But so many of us are trying to grow up, dare I say, grow up a little bit in terms of moving on with our lives, not necessarily having to have a roommate all the time, maybe have our own place.
Another issue for young people and everyone else in this vast riding is the lack of connectivity.
Internet connectivity continues to be an issue. I mean, at our own home, several days a week, my wife complains to me, and I have the frustration of not being able to connect because there's just not the infrastructure, and that's also changed because of the pandemic. So for whether it's for work or for school or for life, and my Rotary Club meets by Zoom. So you need to have connectivity, and here we're behind in the rural parts of this riding, but even in some of the more suburban parts of the riding, it's not up to the speeds that are expected. There was a study that was in the Hamilton Spectator, I think it was last week, that cited that. So, investments into internet infrastructure. I know the province has done some things, the federal government has done some things, and I talked to a lady in Glanbrook the other day who was complaining about this, and I said it doesn't matter which level of government, we just need to get this done. We've put in our platform to do that by 2025. I hope we can get that a lot faster than that, but it's time for action, not talk on connectivity.
Surrounded by natural beauty, it's not hard to see why climate change is an important issue here.
The environment's come up a lot, and if you see the day we're having today, it's not one day, it's days and days and days like this, and people are getting a little worried, very, very worried about climate.
The environment is important to me. It's important to our leader, Aaron O'Toole. Climate change is an issue.
Look around you. I mean, we've got, nobody's talking about, last time I checked, it was 8 or 9 wildfires still burning in Northern Ontario. We were as high as 18 a month ago. What happened to the communities in and around Lytton, BC was absolutely devastating. One day they're setting heat temperatures, and the next week they're not here. We had it in Fort McMurray. We have it every summer in BC in different parts of the country. It's got to stop. We got to, be more conservative of our management of forests and our natural resources. We've got to stop building things that are just going to hinder us moving forward.
For CPAC, I'm Laura Di Battista.